Hello, I'm DIY Dick and welcome to my back garden. Now today, while it's, well, with this lovely weather that we have, what we're going to try and do is continue on a path that I, funnily enough, started previously, which is actually down there. So hopefully you can see that. Now we need to continue that path all the way down there. So actually this weather might actually help do some of the digging and soften up some of the ground, but some of the ground here, or actually quite a lot of the ground, is actually filled with pebbles and also as well with roots, given some of these rather large trees that I've got just behind me there in the background. So not necessarily the easiest thing to do, but as I said, hopefully the rain might actually help us, as long as it doesn't start hailing. So let's make a start. So slightly different perspective of where we need to go. So actually, let me just move back. Hopefully I'll make it even clearer. So there's the path there, and basically we just need to head up, curve slightly left of the washing line, and then just round to the edge of the patio. So that's basically the direction of travel, and I've calculated it's going to take about 300 or so pavers to complete this. So what we need to do is just dig down a bit, put in a small bed of mortar effectively, and then just place the pavers on top. There's quite a few stones and pebbles and various bits and pieces in there, which make this a lot harder, even though only digging down a little way. And the other thing I've got to remember to do as I go is actually put a curve in this, because otherwise it's going to go straight, and that's not going to be exactly what we're after. Well, if it was only this quick in real time, that would be absolutely fantastic. But unfortunately, that's not the case, as we all know, and you've got to grind out the result and do it the hard way. Anyway, what I'm actually doing is just really digging down 3 or so centimetres, about an inch, in addition to the height of the pavers. And the whole point of this is to be able to put the pavers on a bed of mortar. Now, that's not necessarily the most orthodox or traditional approach, but there's a couple of reasons for that approach, which I'll come on to in just a sec. But that is enough. It's not the biggest base to put these things on, but given the traffic, the weight of that traffic, basically how we're going to use it, that is going to be perfectly fine as an actual base to keep them secure and level, no problem whatsoever. So the reason I've done this, I've actually wanted to use pavers anyway. I've actually used pavers to edge the patio, and I fancied using them, and they're quite cheap. They're about 20p each. There's a variety of things I could have done, but one of the reasons I went down the mortaring them into the ground route was because some of the issues I've had on the patio with ants. Just basically, that was a more traditional construction, certainly a very deep sub base, bed of sand because we've got some drains to access, or potentially there'll be some drains to access. So I didn't actually want to, mortar or cement anything in at all. But I have used various materials on the patio to basically fill in the gaps between the paving slabs. However, the ants that we have here can eat for everything, and they build up big piles of earth on the patio. So the whole point of this particular path, I thought I'll use pavers, I'll mortar them in, a lot more effort up front, but that'll be it. Should be much easier on maintenance, and hopefully should do everything we want to do. But time will tell on that one. Now, as you've seen me move up the garden, I'm really just doing this, as I go. I've not really measured it out. Obviously I know the rough route I was going to take, but I've not planned this out in detail, not marked it out in any way, shape or form. I'm just just moving as I go, and just basically adopting the approach. If it looks right, then it is right, and that's going to be good enough, and we'll see at the end of this if that indeed seems to be or proves to be the case. After edging them, what I try to do is just basically dig out the bits in between in sections, and then exactly as you can see me doing now, actually pull them out in as big a sections as possible and fill the bags. I think overall that was fairly successful and did help speed up the digging phase and make it as painless as it could possibly be. And just one other thing to call out is just the sheer amount of earth that gets taken out. It doesn't look a lot, it's not the widest path or the deepest path in the world by any stretch of the imagination, but the sheer amount of spoil, the sheer amount of earth that I managed to fill bags with was just unbelievable. And I think in the end it was around 22 bags worth of earth that needs to be either disposed of or reused. Some great perspective here of all the work that's actually gone in to get us to this stage, and as you can see, I think the edges are a little bit more clearly defined. I've actually done some work off camera, and also as well done some raking just to really smooth that out and just try and move or remove any of the stones and pebbles we got there, but we'll be seeing some more of that later. But whilst doing this and just basically checking as I went that the section that we're going to try and mortar in a minute is basically wide enough through its length, and as the path starts to turn, one of the things I noticed was that some of the old mortar from the original set of pavers that I'd laid down a while back is actually sitting a bit proud of those pavers, which would mean the new ones would also be sitting a bit proud and create a bit of a trip hazard. So either that's acceptable, which I don't think it is, or there's going to be a big gap between the old and new. So easiest thing to do, hammer and chisel, just knock some of that out, trying to be a bit careful, obviously not dislodge the existing pavers that are there, but just enough just to get the right gap and get them sitting flush with what we got already. And talking about gaps, one of the things you might notice is those pavers that I've done previously sitting there. There's not really that big a gap between them, and that's not ideal when it comes to pointing this. So with the new set, that's something we're going to try and correct and just try and get a little bit better. We don't need massive gaps, but just something bigger than we've got there. So last phase now, last rake, just trying to get those last stones. And you can see, even with this last little bit here, the amount of stones and pebbles that are actually just being picked up. But it's important just to get those out of the way, just so none of those are lifting the pavers as we're trying to lay them. Because once we've mixed the mortar, we want to get this down. Everything needs to fit, everything needs to go down, and then we just need to move on to the next lot. So just important to do some final prep and some final checks, and then we can move on to actually building the path. So this is where hopefully everything comes together, the building and laying of the actual path. So, all of that effort, all of that hard work, all the heavy lifting and digging finally comes to this, and we really start to see the fruits of all that hard work. What I'm doing here is just mixing up some mortar, really around the sort of 3 or 4 sharp sand to mortar mix. I've also got the dog in the background just supervising what I'm doing, making sure I'm doing it properly, which must be going okay as she's now laid down and laid on her back and is quite chilled out about the whole situation. So hopefully that continues. And I, on this initial bit, I wasn't quite sure how everything was going to go down. I was quite conscious about how high the pavers were going to be, how level they are with the garden, because again, something else I was conscious of was, when it comes to mowing the garden, again, I did want the pavers to sit proud. So just taking it, quite slowly, not mixing up too much. Didn't want too much of a watery mix either of the mortar. It's quite a hot day. It was going off quite quickly. So, just slowly, just to really start with, and then hopefully after that, trying to pick up some pace. Perhaps things aren't going so well as the dog's moved a bit closer, just to keep a better eye on what's going on, bless her. Anyway, so this first bit went really well. Again, even watching it in this speeded up time frame, it seems to be taking an awful long time, but actually I felt as I was doing it, it went quicker. So that's quite an interesting phenomenon, because I didn't feel that way with the digging phase. Again, always a little bit of raking to do, and I think as you get closer to the bit that you're doing, you just some modification you do, and as you can see here, just some test fits of the pavers as I'm getting closer to the other shed. Also as well, just doing some edging, just making sure it all fits. And hopefully as well here, it just gives you a little better view of the gaps I'm leaving between the pavers, as I mentioned just a minute ago. Not the biggest gaps in the world, but just enough hopefully to help with the pointing earlier. And as you can see as I'm going, I'm also just sort of checking again that they're all level. I know it's only a garden path, but I just didn't want anything to sit proud or trip anything over. And there's always a little bit of settlement as well as you do this, so especially if the mix is a little bit too watery. So just really trying to be a bit particular, and if I can get it right at this phase, hopefully it's set well and it'll be fairly level. So after some torrential rain in the UK, which you wouldn't necessarily know right now given all the sunshine, but I've had to put a ground sheet down just to really try and save what I did previously. Now we can get back outside and we're very, very close to completing the path, or at least bringing it up against the patio. So as you can see where we are there, that is now very, very close to bringing that to the patio, but there's just another couple of bits and pieces I need to do. So one of the bits is I'm going to have a little spur off the path here, which is actually going to take it up to the shed. And just looking at that door needs a little bit of work too. I'll save that for another day. So now the ground is nicely wet and the sun is out, I think it's a good time to do a little bit more digging, just a bit more prep, and just get us closer to getting this job done. On the home stretch now with this last bit of digging, and there is a good reason why I've left a little bit to last, other than getting a bit fed up with digging, and nice to actually see some progress with the laying of pavers, because really the only progress I'd seen to date with all the digging is just lots and lots of bags of mud to move around. So it was nice to take a slightly different approach and have a break from the digging phase and actually get in and get some pavers on the ground. But there was actually another sensible reason as to why that was the case too, and hopefully you're going to see that on screen coming up now. So it's basically because of the way that the path was coming down from the top of the garden to the bottom of the garden by the patio, and connecting the spur off that in the right place. So you'll see in a minute how I'm constructing that and just making sure that the colours match from the red and charcoal coloured pavers. So something else to call out too was that, which I'm hopefully you've noticed from watching this, that I didn't do this all over a day or weekend or even a week. What I tried to do is just do bits whenever I possibly could, even if it was only 2 hours at a time or 3 or 4 hours, if I could get that at a weekend with everything else going on, just to keep it going, whether I'd be digging, clearing ground, or indeed actually laying the pavers as well, which you can see now. And just now coming into the sort of the homeward straight, I had to curve quite aggressively to get it round the washing line and then bring it back round to come onto the path. So it wasn't quite as clean as I want it to be. You can actually see some quite large gaps there between the pavers, especially on the outside of the path, but I was determined not to actually do any cutting and basically just carry on as much as possible and make it look as flush as possible. And I think with the addition of some pointing, that actually cleans things up a lot, and we'll see the pointing part in another video. So right back up the end of the garden again, and hopefully you can see we've now got a path that is also being inspected by the dog, and I think she's semi-impressed by it, although she's decided not to use it. Anyway, really pleased. The bulk of it is done, but that's just really the first part. There's always those finishing touches that need to be done, including sorting out the gaps in between the actual pavers so we don't get the garden growing in them. Also as well, I've got a step to finish here, hopefully you can see that. As well as finishing the end where it joins up with a patio. So still some bits to do, and I'm going to cover that in a part 2. So as it started to rain, I think we'll save that for another day. Thank you very much for joining me. Please subscribe, and see you soon on the channel.